Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to a book talk for Aurora Burning. I just want to flag that this is the second book in the Aurora cycle, so the first book is Aurora Rising, and this video is going to contain spoilers about Aurora Rising and this book. So if you haven't read either of them, or if you haven't read the second book, then I'm going to encourage you not to watch this video. But if you want to hear about Aurora Rising, I've done a separate book talk and I will link that in a card and in the description for you. So just to reiterate, I'm going to be talking about all of my thoughts about the second book, so this is going to contain a lot of spoilers. So if you don't want to know the ending, click away now. Alright, so this book opens a day or a few days after the events of the first book, and you see the crew minus Kat, and I really like the way that grief rippled through the different characters and the different way that it manifested, and I found that really built their character dynamic with themselves and each other. It gave them a really deep foundation, and it wasn't just, lighthearted surface banter anymore. It was that to be entertaining, but it was also the characters becoming more real to me and giving them a depth, and I really respect and like what Amy and Jay did with that aspect of the plot. Before, they kind of tried to work together, but they didn't really have the glue. But now that Kat had passed away and they'd lost someone important to all of them, you really saw that grief manifest, and it really hit me emotionally. It was quite a punch, and I didn't expect when to be emotionally punched. I found that I could really empathize with the characters in the book because obviously grief hit them all at different points and they didn't know when it would strike either. And there was a specific scene where Finn went back to grab the dragon. I think his name is Shamrock, and he is Kat's stuffed toy. And so this dragon follows the crew around and they bring it along, and it's really their last replica of Kat and it's their final memory to her. So when Finn brought that along and the crew realized that he'd been on the deck getting the dragon instead of trying to escape from all of the people chasing them down, they weren't angry at him anymore. They were quite upset but grateful. So this grief, as well as the flirting and the banter and the fast-paced action of the first 2/3 of the book, those are what I really loved, especially about the different character perspectives. And again, like the first book, I found the voices really clear and I knew who was talking, and the way that Amy and Jay have really carved out these perspectives of character are what really hook me and is what had fire in me to continue reading after Aurora Rising, because they really built up characters that I could care about. But unfortunately, in part 4 of the book, or just before part 4 of the book, so it's more than 400 pages in, something happened that was part of the plot and it acted as a plot trajectory, but the way it did, it seemed to undermine all of the character build up to that specific point, and that is what really disappointed me, and it kind of disillusioned me and took the fire away from my caring about the characters. So if that part of the plot hadn't happened, then I would still be obsessed with this series, but as it stands, I lost a lot of my enjoyment factor from that element of the book. Initially, I was trying to take my feelings out of the equation and try and analyze it as if I was not caring about any of the characters, and I was like, is this a rational response to have? And I found that it actually had a significant ripple effect over the course of the series that I'd read so far, and that's why I was so frustrated, just because it felt like the carpet had been pulled out from under my feet. And the thing that I'm talking about is with Cal, who is on the front cover of this book. It's revealed to the crew that Cal's father is the guy who basically destroyed a planet, and so he was henceforth responsible for the death of Tyler and Scarlett's father and a bunch of other, obviously, a lot of other deaths. And the plot only seemed to go down this road of disavowing Cal of the things he's proved in the past, camaraderie and saving the crew's lives and all of that kind of thing. That was just thrown out the window, and that's what really frustrated me, because he's proved himself to them in dire situations again and again that he is part of this crew, but they were like, nah, and then they abandoned him and left him on a planet. And that's when I wanted to stop reading altogether. I was very angry because it had just undermined the entire characterization and character building and work that the whole first book established. And what did Kat die for if she was supposed to unite them, when all of a sudden they're deciding to dump part of their crew on a planet and leave him behind? So that's what really got under my skin with this book. I was frustrated because this could have been something that the crew used as, tension in the moment and ongoing as part of Cal's character to integrate with the crew and to, not to prove himself, but to prove that they could continue their relationship with him without it being so destructive. But they just left him behind and there wasn't a chance for that. And that's what frustrated me, because if the plot required Cal to go with Aurora at the end of the book, he would have done that anyway. He's followed her everywhere so far, so feasibly he would have followed her to where she went to meet his father. Like, it's his father, of course he would go with her. So if the plot only needed him to be rejected from the crew for him to show up later, that doesn't seem like a very strong reason for the crew to reject him. And it also doesn't seem like a very sound reason for Aurora to reject him as well, because when she was inside the Eshvaran time bubble thing and they spent 6 months in there with her training montage, sabotage. They obviously built a relationship together and now they have a deeper understanding of each other. So for that trust to be broken with one reveal after she's known him for that long and they've spent that much time together one-on-one, it just didn't seem very realistic, and it just seemed like something that was sprinkled in as like a unnecessary drama for the plot to go forward. And I thought that because Amy and Jay have written books that I've loved and they've specifically avoided situations like this in their past work, I wasn't expecting it to crop up in here, and I think that's what extra disappointed me. And just to build on that, when the crew rejected him, I thought, well, Tyler isn't there because Tyler was separated from the crew earlier on when there was a big battle and he got captured with Sadie by the GIA. I'll get to Sadie in a minute because I don't really like her either, but Tyler was separated from them. So I thought, well, the crew have probably just gotten rid of him because they don't have their leader there to go, hey, you guys are being irrational, stop that, because we've established that Cal is a person who will stick up for us and he's our friend and he's our brother, that kind of thing. But no, it went to Ty's perspective, and Sadie was telling him about her history and stuff and revealed that Cal's father was the guy who destroyed the planet, and then Tyler decided to shun him as well. And it just seemed really weak in the character building, and I thought that was where a strength was in this book, and especially in the last book as well. It just felt incredibly out of character with what has previously been built up, and I think that's why it was so jarring to me, because as soon as this started happening I was like, wait. So I kind of didn't believe it at first because it seemed irrational and out of character, especially because the driving force behind rejecting Cal was Scarlet, and she is supposed to be a character who is their face, and she can read emotions and read people really, really well. So the fact that she can't see past this reveal and go, no, Cal has trusted us and we've trusted him, he's our friend, and didn't kick him off the ship, it just seemed counterintuitive to what had already been set up, and so it didn't really seem to fit quite well. It's like the last puzzle piece that you really want to fit in the puzzle, and so you squish it in there, but it kind of fits, but it's a bit painful, and that's how I felt towards this plot point at the end of the book. So I'm going to come back to this whole plot character thing in a second, but I need to talk about the trigger aspect of the book. So that is with Aurora and Carson, the father of Cal and Sadie, and I thought that this was going to be built up in a brilliant way of Aurora going to do the training and then getting to the last part and then realizing that she can't let Cal go, and that is why that she couldn't, I guess, ascend to where the Eshvaran wanted her to go and enhance all of her power. But Carson did. He doesn't have any earthly ties anymore, and he's portrayed as cold and almost psychopathic in a way, and so I was like, well, that makes sense that Aurora chose love and strength instead of just cold, blind power. But later on, because she's rejected Cal, she goes down the whole choosing power thing instead and has this whole spiel about the fact that she's now rejected earthly ties. So what I thought was going to become this cool balance of choosing strength and power and flourishing because you have a crew and a team of people behind you that love and care about and trust you, to versing, you know, ultimate power corrupts ultimately. I thought that would be a really good dichotomy to explore, but it didn't really go down that path. So maybe that's the path it's going to go down in book 3, but I thought it had a really solid foundation to go down the path in book 2. And so if this plot that we were thrown, kind of like a spanner that was thrown in the works unnecessarily, if we were thrown that just so that that plot could be put off to book 3, that's a bit frustrating to me. So getting into the ending of this book, I liked parts of it, and then there were other parts that I thought that can't be real, because otherwise it's going to end the same way the first book did, because Cal sacrifices himself essentially to save Aurora. And in that moment, Aurora realizes that he does love her after all, which is what he's been saying this entire time, so I don't know why nobody listened to him. But if he dies in this book and the crew continue on without him and then realize the error of their ways about Cal, that's going to really frustrate me, because it's the same formula that ended the first book, and I thought that we were building on the first book. Does everyone follow where I'm going? Please do let me know if this doesn't make sense to you, or if you read the book a completely different way, because this is structurally what I'm thinking. It doesn't seem to balance out, and my feelings are of a little bit of betrayal because I don't think things are matching up in a way. But also Amy and Jay confirmed that time travel is a part of this universe, so maybe it's all going to get rewritten, and I don't know if I'm going to be entirely happy with that, because if this is just a part of the plot that you can pick up and throw away later, why have it so significantly change your characters? Because if this is going to be rewritten later, it's fairly glaringly obvious that this is going to be changed, because why have your characters act that out of character and then sacrifice somebody when you can just undo it all? But that's just speculation. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. happen. So I should just talk about what is actually going on in the book. So I'm getting into the sacrifice part. So Kat sacrificed herself in book 1 to solidify the crew and help them escape. So because they had her sacrifice to unite them together, they could gel better, and they had something that was, again, uniting them and that they could all relate to, and their grief made them more human. But in this book, they all reject Cal, and then he sacrifices himself. So his sacrifice is different in the sense that he was just like the sacrificial lamb, and he was needed to do that in order for the plot to go forward. And that feels more empty to me than the first part, because in the first book, Kat dying was something that I really respected, and I thought that she might come back, like I said in my first book talk about Aurora Rising, and then she didn't. Well, she kind of did in here, but it's not her. Because of that, it felt genuine. And then because of the way Cal was like sacrificed in this book, sacrificed, I'm not sure if he's coming back yet or if he's even dead. That was a bit disappointing to me because it was more hollow than the first sacrifice, if that makes sense. So all of this is me bumbling about saying that I'm disappointed in characterization. That is what all of this talk boils down to. And I'm also a bit nonplussed at the introduction of Sadie, and I think I could have enjoyed her introduction and her integration into this story, but I don't think it was done in a way that I could get on board with it. I know that some people have loved her and there are cosplays of her and stuff, so I might just be the outlier here, but I really didn't like her reading this book, and I'm going to explain why. So she's Cal's sister. She's introduced as this lethal and capable strategist, right? And at the beginning she seemed like that. She seemed very capable and destructive and aggressive and not taking no for an answer. But when she had Tyler on her ship and she was talking to him and stuff, and she had the choice to press a button and start a war or not, Tyler gave some really decent reasoning, and instead of her listening to him and considering all options, she just went gung-ho ahead and pressed the button and essentially started a war. So she just really seemed angry to me, angry and blinded almost by the value that she had as a kid to what she is now, and that just seems like, I am Warbreed and I will kill things, and that is not enough for me to care about a character. She seems very 2D to me, and the fact that she didn't consider Tyler's opinion at all or consider his viewpoint at all doesn't strike me as somebody who is intelligent. So if I'm told somebody is intelligent, I expect it to be reinforced in their actions, and so far Sadie hasn't really reinforced that enough for me. She just doesn't get past her blind hatred of people. She just can't see past the values she's brought up with as a kid, even though she's reasoned out of it, and she doesn't have a logical reasoning to establish the way that she is. She just is that way, and that speaks of somebody who is fairly weakly written. I hesitate to say that because I love Amy and Jay's writing and I respect them as people, and to say that their writing is weak, I'd find really rude if that was said to me about my writing. But the way that Sadie's character was built up, it just didn't seem genuine to me. And I have an example, and that is from The 100. So in, I think, season 2 of The 100, we're introduced to a character named Lexa, and I'm not going to spoil The 100, but I just wanted to give like a loose example of what Sadie could have been and what I was expecting her to be versus what she actually is. So Lexa from The 100 is a character who lives on the ground, and in The 100 we follow these characters who are living in a spaceship called the Ark, and after 100 years they come down, and there are 100 juvenile delinquents. They get sent down to Earth to see if it's habitable, right? And the people believe that Earth is abandoned, basically, that no one is living down there. But of course, surprise, because we need conflict, there are civilizations on the ground, and they're called the Grounders. They often clash with the Sky people, and sometimes they're just attacked for the fact that they're different. But Lexa is like, okay, I've got all of these values from the Grounders. I have a culture and I have an understanding, but I want to listen to this. What's going on here? And she gives them the airtime to actually have a conversation with her. And she might still decide to go down the avenue of war or battle or, whatever she decides. But at the beginning, she decided to have a conversation, and she used reasoning, and she tries to integrate that reasoning in the way that she talks to the other Grounders like herself. So that to me is an intelligent character, someone who is willing to think outside of their values that they've been brought up with. Sadie doesn't seem to strike the same note that Lexa did. So I am struggling to see her as somebody who is intelligent for that reason. She just seems like a kid who is still throwing a tantrum and still wanting her father to give her attention and convince everyone that she is Warbreed and therefore fierce and formidable. And that's what I wasn't believing, because she was just saying it and being aggressive rather than following through with things. So because she's got this history of being aggressive and condemning people without caring, and she threw Tyler into a pit to be mauled and eaten by basically a giant dragon. She didn't listen to anybody before she did that. So because she's got this history, I was expecting her to stay rigid for the entire book. But within, a couple of hours, she's starting to listen to Tyler and then tells him her whole life story. And that just seemed very unrealistic realistic to me. And the fact that she also escaped with him and then kissed him on the cheek in respect because she saw that he was strong. If she can read minds, she knows what conflict he's experiencing every single day and the grief that he's trying to overcome for Kat, and the fact that he is being defiant to the people that he thought he trusted and has rejected all of his values to become a better person. Surely she would be able to read that in his mind and therefore realize that something big is going on around her and that she's just a kid throwing a tantrum in the grand scheme of things. But no, that is not her viewpoint at all. So I struggle to believe that she would give her entire life story to Tyler over the space of, a day maybe, or a few hours, when previously she was happy to throw him down into a pit and watch him die for fun. So from going to that to kissing him on the cheek and escaping with him, I'm not really buying it. And so if she is getting set up to effectively join the crew in the third book as an extra character that adds a layer of angst, then I'm going to be very frustrated because I didn't like reading about her whatsoever in this book. Whenever she came into a scene with Tyler, I was like, oh no, because I just wanted to read about Tyler. I didn't want to read about Sadie. And then just in addition to that, in her confinement with Tyler, the fact that she did start to talk to him like a human being and respect him, it means she undid an entire history of her development of hating humans. And I don't believe that that would happen in one day. I don't believe that. And so it just didn't seem like it was legitimate, that's all. I know I am saying a lot of negative things about this book, and they're just a few things that seem quite significant about the book. Sadie as a newly introduced character, and then a big plot thing that happens at the end that informed character decisions. It just didn't really sit right with me. Again, like that puzzle piece that's trying to get shoved into the last spot, it didn't really click. At least it wasn't clean, not for me. So despite those things, I did really enjoy the beginning though, and I will continue on because I liked pieces of the ending. So I did give this a 3 out of 5 stars. I did like it, but I didn't love it, and I was a bit disillusioned by it towards the end. The things I did like though was the ripples of grief throughout the book. It really brought solidarity to the crew and it really unified them against what they were trying to face off. I also really liked learning about Cal's childhood, which we find out towards the middle of this book when he's talking to Aurora, and I really liked also learning about Zilla because we don't really see much of her in the first book. She doesn't have a lot of character perspective, and we learn that in this book that's because of trauma, and she has tried to cut herself off because when she was 6 years old she basically saw everyone she cared about get murdered by people who wanted to kidnap her and invade her ship. So she has cut herself off from feeling for that reason, and she's finding her feet essentially again with these crewmates again, and she's starting to care about them. And I think that makes the fact that she rejected Cal later more of a betrayal, because she had started to open up to everybody, including him, and the fact that she could just turn on a dime like everybody else and say, nah, we'll leave you on a planet, it doesn't seem as realistic as the plot made it out to be. And then, like I said, I did enjoy the ending. There were obviously pieces I didn't enjoy, like Cal essentially sacrificing himself. Whether he's dead or not, it cuts off on a cliffhanger, so I don't actually know. Aurora might resurrect him or might actually save him, I'm not sure. He was talked about as being a Waywalker earlier in the book, and that Aurora sensed that power in him, and I imagine that because it was buried deep down, maybe it comes back up and he saves himself with the Waywalker ability he has. I'm not quite sure, but that's my prediction, I guess. And then the other thing I liked was the aspect of time travel that was kind of introduced. It wasn't touched on too much, but the crew received a gift from Destoy, who is the academy leader essentially, and he believes everything that they're talking about with the GIA, but he can't publicly disavow the GIA. So he has to kind of work with them and publicly disavow the crew, but secretly he's helping them because he knows that they're doing the right thing. So he gifts them a spaceship and he gifts them a whole bunch of trinkets from a safety deposit box. And it turns out that box was put there like 8 years ago. So somebody has set this all up for them and they don't know how it happened. So I like that time travel aspect and the fact that it added mystery and intrigue to the plot, because they all got an item from this box and you don't know what significance it's going to have until it appears in the plot. And I like that that had a driving force behind it, and that's what made me extra interested in each character perspective, because I liked all of the character voices before, but this added an extra little nugget of mystery to each one that I really enjoyed. But as it stands, like I said, I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I wanted to love it, but there were obviously things I didn't enjoy about it. There were things I did enjoy though, and there were nuggets of stuff that I would like to see explored more in the third book. So I'm hoping that Cal's demise in the end of this book is like a false start and we actually see what really happened to him and that he's alive and that he hasn't been disbanded from the crew, because I think that's a ridiculous plot point. And I also want to see more of the dichotomy of love versus cold power with the 2 different triggers, because that was a really interesting dichotomy that could have been explored here and it wasn't. So the crew took on essentially the big bad guy in this book in a very divided way, because Tyler's not even present. Cal got disavowed, Aurora took him on herself, and then the other crew members were separated from her in their ship and they have this stone and then it blept into nowhere. So hopefully that means that they're all going to be reunited again and all go together towards this enemy as one, because that's what, honestly, love, strength, and friendship and trust is supposed to do. It's supposed to unite everybody against the thing that's bad. So I hope that that's the theme that continues in the third book, because that is really what I'd like to see. But this book can basically be summed up by, I didn't like the whole Cal is evil because his father is evil plot point in here, and I liked the characterization up until that point, and I didn't like Sadie. So that is really the bare bones of my enjoyment and disillusionment of this book, because if they're taking the value of Cal is like his father because his father is evil tack, then surely that needs to apply to Ori as well, because her father is the head of the GIA and he's essentially working for the Rasham. So wouldn't that apply to Ori as well? Why haven't the crew disavowed her? So it's a plot point that I don't really gel with. So I'm hoping it gets somewhat rectified in the third book, but I'm really putting a lot of expectations on the third book to bring things back, because I really, really want to love this series and I love the first book. So I'm going into the last book with optimism and hope. So please let me know if you are the same, because I haven't really heard many people talking about this aspect of the book. I've only really seen people shouting about the ending, which is something that I enjoyed and was shock factor to me, but I haven't heard anyone talking about these aspects of the book. So I'm assuming I'm an outlier, and the things I disliked are things that regular people just enjoyed, and I'm making a fuss about nothing potentially. But that's why I wanted to make this book talk, to see if anybody thought the same things as me. So let me know down in the comments if you thought the same thing. Thank you so much for watching this book talk. I'll talk to you in the comments and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye.